So, Matthew 2, verses 1 to 14. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes and people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had properly called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt. And be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt.
Well, I'd love to be able to speak to you in Latin, but I can say this. I came, I saw, I conquered. Whatever that is in Latin, you can say it if you want. What is it? Here we are, okay. I didn't sound very Italian, I must say, but there we are. Sounded more a little bit like me, but I think you got the right words. I've taken it from there. They came, they saw, and they were conquered. They were conquered, or I conquered. It's from the account that Joseph has kindly read for us, the story of the wise men that came in and saw Jesus. And I just want to look at some of the things that comes across in the chapter. It says they came from the east. They came from far. They came from a long way off. Going by their name, not their personal name, but by the title that they're given, the Magi. I think that's how you pronounce it. Might be something else if it's not pronounced correctly. But that means they would have come from Persia, or the limits of Persia, the Magi that was from that area. It would be, I suppose, today, Iran, or maybe on the borders of Iran, on the eastern side. And so they would have travelled. They came from far, but they came with a great purpose. Where is he that is born, King of the Jews? For we've come to worship him. They've come from far. It seems, from the way the scriptures are penned in Matthew, it seems that they've been travelling about 2 years. For the child is not in the manger, he's not at the inn, he's in the house. He's in Bethlehem. And so those early years were spent in Bethlehem. They came from a far, far land, but they came with purpose. And they came with perseverance. I've been struck over recent days, even this week when we did the study, the final 2 chapters of 2 Corinthians, Paul says the signs of an apostle was wrought among you. And he said the first sign was this, with all perseverance. We tend to think of an apostle that will come in and blow everything apart there and then. We don't think of the struggles. We don't think of the fights. We don't think of the battles, the spiritual battles. And yet Paul, when he looked for a sign of an apostle, the first one was perseverance. They could so easily have given up. Why they took 2 years, I'm sure it wouldn't take 2 years to travel from there. From one side, say, the farthest point of Persia, modern day Iran or whatever it is, right across to Israel. I'm sure in the natural context of things, it took time. And they persevered. It's quite clear that that star was not always in view. They saw the sign of the star in the east. And the next time we hear of it, it's in Jerusalem, moving out towards Bethlehem. And so we find with these, they came from a far, far country. They came with purpose of heart, and they came with perseverance. They didn't give up. And so often we think in Christian life that it's almost like at the click of a finger. There are some who come in contact with the gospel message, and their lives are transformed in a moment. But you find as you go through your own experience and you listen to the experience and testimony of others, that sometimes they've been seeking for years. Sometimes they've been searching, and doesn't that what the Lord speak? He says, when you search for me with all your heart, then you shall find me. And so these men are seeking. They're seeking a king. They're seeking someone that they can worship. And they've come from a far country. They've come with perseverance. Jesus said, didn't he? You keep on seeking mine. You keep on knocking mine. You keep on asking mine. You keep on doing those things that are so important. Just don't give up. And the Gospel of John is written in that tense so very, very, very often. It's not a case of believe, it's keep believing. You find it in the Gospel of John constantly. The temptation is to believe. It's a one-off measure of faith. Believe. But no, John constantly says, you must keep believing. Yes. And so here, this first group, or this first little verse that we look at, they came from far. Do you know, I only lived about 1.5 miles from the Healing Church. But I have to say, I came from far. I came from a long way off. I don't know about you. When you first came to Christ, from where did you come? I came from an unchurched background. My mother would tense up at the songs of praise. The only time she could relax with any sort of religious music was at Christmas time, when the Salvation Army brass band would come into the street. That's the only time she could relax with anything to do with the gospel. You see, I came from that background. Unfortunately for me, the first time I heard the gospel was in November 76. By March 77, I was saved. By March 77, I'd come a long way. I didn't require the diligence and the perseverance that these men had. But it throws us into light, doesn't it? It doesn't always happen overnight. Think of that man that came from Ethiopia, that traveled to Jerusalem with purpose in his heart to worship God. And he came away not knowing Christ. And he's making his way back home again, thinking he's done what's required of him. But then Philip is waiting for him and asks him what he's reading. And there in the desert place, he leads him to Christ. He'd come a long way, hadn't he? From deepest Africa, across the continent, into Jerusalem. And there, the grace of God met him, not in the temple, but in a desert place, where just down the road there was a little pool where Philip could baptize him. The timing of God, isn't it? The timing of God. It's a marvelous thing how God provides in so many instances. Let's move on to the next thing. In verse 11 it says, they saw. Well, verse 10 says, they saw the star that was once in the east. They saw the star. and they rejoiced exceedingly greatly. There was a tremendous sense of joy resting in this house when they saw the star. But when they saw him, they fell down. They fell down. That word fell there, it speaks of a building falling, a tower falling, a wall falling. In fact, it's the same words when the walls of Jericho fell down in Hebrews 11. It's the same word. Utter and complete collapse. Now all they were looking at was a child, 2 years of age, and they are overwhelmed. They had come this long path. I remember the mate of mine. He's probably the fittest bloke I've ever trained with, ever in my life. I met one boy when I was in my teens who naturally was he was Olympic potential. But if he wasn't there when we were being trained on the rugby field in St. Enid, I would always win the race around the thing. But if he was there when we raced around the pitch, he would always beat me. And he beat me by a mile. Naturally, well, I say naturally, he was at 5 o'clock every morning. A boy 16 years of age, training. And he was geared for the future of athletics, but wasn't to be for him. But I remember working with one lad from Ferndale. He's probably one of the most temperamental characters I've ever come across in my life. You just never quite knew what was going to happen with him. And I remember him saying when Princess Diana passed away, he'd gone up to London. His girlfriend wanted to go up and pay respects. And he said, we went there, and when they were all at, was it Hyde Park or the gardens around Buckingham Palace? I can't quite remember now, where all the great crowds were. And he said, you got there? And he said, I found myself just standing there, pouring with tears, overcome by it all, the sense of emotion that was there, and so the different things that were going on there. And so we find with these that there's no crowd there. There's nothing there of emotion there. They've come a long way. And when their eyes fix on him, they are overwhelmed. They're overawed. They've been conquered. They fall down at his feet. It says there, when they saw him, they fell down and they worshipped him. It's a lovely verse. I think it's Psalm 96. I don't know how many times I've referred to it over the years, but I think it's one of the loveliest verses that we can ever come across. Come, let us worship and bow down. In English it would say this, come, let us bow down and bow down. It's what's going on outwardly is going on inwardly. And so as they bowed their knees, their hearts are bowing before the Lord. They were overawed, overwhelmed by what they saw, this young child. And as they completed the journey, as they saw him, they fell before him and they worshipped him. They kissed the hand. That's what that word worship means in the New Testament. They kissed the hand. When John saw him in the book of Revelation, it says, I turned to see the voice of him that spoke. And when I turned, I saw him, and I fell as a dead man. In all his regalia of Revelation chapter 1, when he saw him with his whitened hair, his eyes of fire, his feet of bronze, all the different things that were there to describe his complete and utter majesty. And when I saw him, he said, I felt like a dead man. But thank God, it says that Jesus put his hand upon him and said, don't be afraid, John. Don't be afraid. It's me. And so, with these men, we don't know how many he is, but all we know that they were wise men. They were magi from the east. They were overwhelmed when they saw him, and they worshipped him. As Uncle Cliff would say, they were lost in wonder, love, and praise. But then he goes goes on to say something else. They came, they saw, they fell, they worshipped, they opened their treasures. They carried these things with them on their journey. We carry baggage with us, don't we? We carry baggage with us. And so they opened these treasures. This word here, treasure, storehouse. Everything that was theirs was in that box. Storehouse. And they opened the treasures. We were talking on Thursday night. I forget the instance that Lee was talking about now. But I said about, with Moses, wasn't it? I said that God said to him, what's that in your hand, Moses? He said, with a stick. Do you know, Moses, I can do a lot with a stick. I can do a lot with a stick. Willie Burton's mother said to him, what's that in your hand? It was a pencil. And a great missionary as he was, great carpenter as he was, great furnisher as he was, above all, you'd have to say, probably such an artist. God can use that, William. God can use that pencil. And his pictures or his paintings and drawings went around the world. His maps, designed in the 1910s, the 1915s, what do they call it? The noughties, and then whatever is after that. His maps were still being used in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The same maps that he designed were the same maps. He was a man that was brilliant with a pencil. And what's that in your hand, William? What's that in your treasure? What's that in your storehouse that I can use? They open. I read this morning, I mentioned this morning, reading this book that I've been reading, F.B. Mayer, and he preached to 1,000 ministers. And he preached and he said this. This was the text, or this was the simple words that he brought to them. It was so important for them to open their heart. So important for them. I mentioned this morning about Deborah's song, when leaders lead, the people give themselves willingly. And in the New King James Version, in the margin it says, when locks are unlocked. So you see, I can be a lock. I can be a lock. The Pharisees were locks, weren't they? You won't go in, he said, but you won't let anybody else go in either. And you make them worse than what they were. When leaders lead, when locks are unlocked, when hearts are open. And here they open their treasures. And they bring out gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, I think it's so easy just to spiritualize these things, what this gold means, what this frankincense means, what this myrrh means. But just let's look at them at face value, what they were all about. The gold came from their occupation. They were wise men. There's no mention of kings in Matthew's account. No mention of kings at all. This gold was their monies, their earnings. And they would travel, and with their wisdom, they would have earned different things. And so the gold was there. The frankincense and myrrh could well have been used for their devotions and their incantations. And so they opened their treasures. I grant it, I'm not arguing that they didn't come as spiritual gifts. I'm not denying that at all. But it could be that we look too far sometimes and just take things as they are in front of us. Where did that gold come from? They earned it. It didn't mean they were fiendish with it. It didn't necessarily mean that at all. They earned it. They were wealthy men. And they came. They brought their frankincense and their gold and their myrrh. And those things could be used in their devotions. As they opened their treasures and gave these gifts to the Christ child, are they saying, that's our past. We're leaving it now with you. We sing that chorus, don't we? All that I am, I lay before you. All I possess, Lord, I confess, is nothing without you. Savior and King, I now exalt you. Oh, I was forgetting that. All three have spiritual meanings, of that I have no doubt at all. But when you just take it on, as you see it in front of you, this gold, this frankincense, this myrrh, belong to them. And as they opened their treasures, they gave these to the Christ of God. They were leaving the past behind. They met the King. Notice what it says in verse 11 or verse 12 as well. They departed another way. Do you know when you meet Jesus, you never walk the same way again. You never follow the path that you were once following. He gives you a new path to follow. Amen. When Saul met Samuel for that first occasion, it says simply this: he departed another man. He wasn't the same. Paul says concerning the Christian, all things are passed away and all things have become new. He talks about the old man and the new man. And so these men, they depart another way. Have you come a long way and not found him yet? Has your road been a long road and you've grown weary? Fear not. If you keep looking, you'll find him. If you keep seeking, I know there are times when that weariness comes. Well, what's the point? These men must have come across times like that. Must have. Build it into your own life. Haven't there been times when you've wanted to see something fulfilled and it's come to a point, it's almost like a bottleneck? I was talking to a relative of mine the other day, and the promotions that went on, the success that was there, and he came to a bottleneck, and the frustrations that built up at the bottleneck, simply because he couldn't get through. So many were trying for this next position, trying to get through it. The weariness that set in to such a point, the relative said to me, enough is enough, you're not bothering. For career now, that was. These came a long way, searching for 2 years, with purpose in their heart. They even got it wrong. They thought, if he's a king, surely he'll be in a palace. But he was in a house. And by the grace of God, that star appeared again. And they came. And they saw him. And when they saw him, they fell down before him and worshipped him. And then they opened their treasures. Have you got a talent? A talent was a measure of money. Have you got a talent in your heart that God can use? What you got in that storehouse of yours? You know, I remember working down the tar plant, and there'd be boys there. Oh, they could peel an orange in their pocket. There would be some, and they could get sweets out of this pocket that would go down to their knee, and they'd come out, it'd be all unwrapped ready, and they'd go straight in, and they wouldn't share it. I wonder if God is stirring the heart and saying, will you open those treasures? Let's see what we can do with them. and you'll never be the same again. You'll walk a different path. Because you've seen him, you've worshipped him, and he has given you a path to walk upon. This is what Christmas is. Where people have been seeking God and trying to find what he's like, and they find out that he was born in Bethlehem, a Savior for all mankind. Christmas is about giving, and they gave their time, they gave their treasures, they gave themselves. And one day, by the grace of God, we'll meet with them up there in heaven. What a glorious day it will be. There we are. This is a